running around today. This is so fun. I love days like this. So today, my talk is living by love. And a lot of it's based in the teachings of Jesus, you know, the master teacher Jesus. And a couple weeks ago, one of the congregants came and brought me a little funny. And I love to be able to share them when I can. So I'm going to start with that today. So the Sunday school teacher asked her first graders, "Where can we find Jesus today?" Mary said, "In our hearts." Billy said, "In heaven." Tommy said, "In our bathroom." Asked to explain, smart Sunday school teacher asked him to explain that. He said, "Well, every morning my dad knocks on the bathroom door and says, 'Jesus Christ, are you ever going to come out?'" Yes. All right, so I love that one, so thank you for the gift of that. So this month we're talking about love and how it operates in our lives and how we can align and see love differently, right? Our theme this year is 2020 Perfect Spiritual Vision. And the whole theme of this is that in these times, in these tumultuous, crazy times, we have a choice whether we're going to dig into the weeds of what we see in front of us and believe that, or rise up and see from a spiritual perspective that something is coming forward, that something's wanting to be born in what's happening, and that we have a choice as to how we react to it. So instead of reacting from our fear, from our hurt, from what we see out, we are choosing and creating from the place of what we know is possible. So the idea in this month, as we're talking about love, and today as we're talking about living by love, is we're looking at how we can actually live the powerful presence of love in all that we do. Because it's a nice idea. We like to talk about it, you know. I did my whole spiel last week about the Hallmark holiday, and I don't care, you know. But I don't care if it's a Hallmark holiday. If it's more love, it's a good thing. But this week it's really about how we can set our intention on being loving, on acknowledging the love in our lives, and to create more of that. Because what we know is when we put our attention on something, it expands. That's the basic principle. So if you're going to put your attention on the fact that you don't have love in your life, if you put your attention on that belief you're holding that you're not worthy or you're not lovable, then that's what's going to expand. And that's what you're going to create more of and more of and more of. And it's just not true. None of it is true. And so why do we have to experience these false ideas in action? We don't. But it takes us taking responsibility to realize what's really true for us and what's not. And so when somebody else tells you you're not lovable, or when someone leaves or insults you or judges you or whatever, you have a choice whether you're going to take that in. And it only comes in and plants itself in you when it mirrors your own belief about yourself. But the idea here is that when we connect and realize that we are part of this divine life, that as that reading said, there's a God seed within you that was planted in you from before time. When we know that and can find it and we can realize that, then everything we do, every choice we make, everything we create, everything we experience comes from that essence and energy. And you know what? That's a whole different ballgame. That's freedom. That's joy. That's creativity, right? That's love in action. And so by living by love, I'm talking about how we can do that in a more conscious way. Many people live on survival in the world, right? There's a level of survival that happens. And at different times, maybe to a degree that we are on that essence of survival. And that means that every ounce of energy, everything we have is focused on getting those foundational needs met. Shelter, food, clothing, making enough money, taking care of our children. Living on survival is a challenge. Sometimes many people are living asleep right? It's like we're out on the ocean just kind of bumping around, floating around, and hoping that a big wave doesn't come and capsize us. We're not awake to the fact that we have a wheel and we have a motor and we could go somewhere if we want. But there are moments when we do, when we live asleep and we're called to wake up. Some live in reaction to the past. You know anybody like that? I'm not asking you to raise your hands. Sometimes we live in reaction to the past. That there was something that happened in our past. Maybe it's the glory days, right? Maybe it's the moment you felt strong and you were it, right? There's a moment where we all feel like, yeah, that everything's working, it's great, everything's wonderful. Maybe it's that we focus on that time because there was a moment where it went off the rails. And sometimes some people are so traumatized by that shift or that swerve in life that that's where they're living. Everything would have been fine if that didn't happen. I know a lot of people who live in that. And so the rest of our lives have been just in reaction to that, and that may be 5, 10, 50 years ago that something happened, and we're still living in that time. My wish for us, my intention for us is to let that stuff go, to be able to realize that everything that happened in our life got us to this moment, and this is a moment of choice, this is a moment of power, this is a moment of creativity. And when we affirm our truth, the truth of our being as that presence of love, we create out of that. That is living by love. And let me tell you, I know it's not easy. Things are kind of interesting these days. My daughter keeps using the word interesting. My daughter's 12. She keeps using the word interesting, and every time she says it, I'm like, okay, you're going to have to tell me more about that. What does that mean? What is interesting? But let me just say, these are interesting times. Every day, there's something new. And we have a choice whether to live in reaction to that or be creative in our own lives. I believe that the Master Teacher Jesus, along with many other wise sages and prophets, came to teach us how to live by love, how to live in general, but the main core teaching was how to stop fighting one another and learn to be in harmony and love together. The idea that we are each in service to God through service to the people that we're in relationship with, that we're in this life with. So that includes praying for our enemies, forgiving those who persecute us, treating others as we wish to be treated. You know, we can't sit back and wait for others to create kindness in the world. We can't sit back and wait for others to be respectful. I had these very clear images of 7th grade dance this week, right? Where the boys are on one side and the girls are on the other side, and they all stand there and the music's blaring and the lights are going and no one's dancing, right? And all they're doing is they're so afraid. They're so afraid, you know? And all they're doing is missing the fun, right? I was a chaperone for one of those dances a couple months back, and they all just stood there, right? And I was like, I'm that mom. I'm sorry, I am that mom. I was like, can I run in the middle and just start dancing? Will that help, you know? Yeah, my poor kid. I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that, you know? But I just wanted to tell them, come on, let's do it, right? So the idea for us is that we're the ones that have to create the kindness. We're the ones who have to create those situations. We're the ones who have to share our love. We have to be the ones to do it and not wait for it to come to us. If we wait for it to come to us, all we're going to be doing is waiting. And watching these divides get deeper, and watching this disrespect get worse, and having people get offended, and all of a sudden it's this, Mount Everest of anger. And I'm feeling that. I'm feeling it get bigger and bigger and bigger these days. But what we can do is in our circle is we make that as we realize the truth that this love is alive within us, that there is a presence of God as us, that we are called to be a channel of love. And if we start to just allow ourselves to be vulnerable and say, you know what, I'm sorry that you're feeling hurt. I didn't mean it. Very simple, very hard to do. Our pride and our egos get in the way. I should be treated better. Well, something else is operating that we don't see. Something else is happening in those situations that maybe we don't understand. And if we are willing to be curious about what's happening and what's coming forward, then we can come from our hearts and we can speak truth and we can hear it from someone else. Not as a judgment, not as an insult, not as a criticism. But there's all these phrases that they talk about, right? That we're walking each other home, that we're growing up all over each other, that we're working together to create heaven on earth. We are in this divine matrix, and you know what? Yeah, we're bumping up against each other, and that's what happens. But we have to be willing to go there and to be authentic and real. Not in a harsh way, but in a surrendered way. So we're called to give our loving service to mankind, right? And that means that those that we find easy to love and those that may be a little more difficult. So it's an interesting proposition because how do we know that we're actually acting from love? We do good deeds, we are helpful. But sometimes those motivating factors aren't necessarily pure, right? Sometimes it's like, look at me. Look what I did for this person here. And sometimes it's things, people do nice deeds for other people waiting for that return, right? So when we're coming from our ego, when we're coming from that need, my favorite is, I'm so mad at them, I'm gonna get them with my kindness. You ever done that? I'm gonna kill them with kindness. They're not gonna be able to be mad at me because I'm gonna, what kind of energy is that? And I'll admit, I've had that one before. I'll admit. But there's no possible way they could be mad at me if I do this, Well, hello. That's not from the authentic desire to be a creative force of love in this life. It's for me feeling like I need to prove myself. Well, I don't need to prove myself to anybody, and neither do you. So our idea is not to come from our ego. It's not to come from that place of wanting to prove someone else wrong by you being right. The idea is being of service for being of service. Joel Goldsmith, who's the author of the Book of the Month, says that he reminds us that it's actually God's love and not our own love that we share into the lives and into the world, into our lives and into the world. He reminds us of the scripture that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. Well, each of us is the begotten. Yes, we believe that Jesus was the most enlightened being that came to earth. He was the teacher. He was the most realized spiritual expression. But he was a human. And he was a teacher, and he came to show us how to do it. And in every single thing, we are also the begotten. Begotten means created. Begotten means birthed. Begotten means sent forth. Each of us has been sent forth into this life by God. And that spark, that divine spark, that connection to the Infinite One has never gone away. That cord has never been cut, and it can't be. You are part of the divine life. You are part of God. You are the begotten Son of the One. And so, as we realize that divine spark is within us, we remember it, because you know what? Life makes us forget. Life makes us forget that we are connected to something. It wants us to feel separate. And I think that the whole goal of life is for us to go deep within, to find that connection again, to find that place where we know that there's something greater than we are, that's wanting to be expressed, that's wanting to come forth through us. I found a Hindu story that reminded me of this. There was once a time when all human beings were gods. But they so abused their divinity that Brahma, the chief god, decided to take it away from them and hide it where it could never be found. Where will you hide their divinity, was the question. So Brahma called a council of the gods to help him decide. Let's bury it deep in the earth, said the gods. But Brahma answered, no, that will not do, because humans will dig into the earth and they'll find it. Then the gods said, well, let's sink it in the deepest ocean. But Brahma said, no, not there, for they will learn to dive into the ocean and they'll find it. Then the gods said, let's take it to the top of the highest mountain and hide it there. But once again, Brahma replied, no, that will not do either, because they will eventually climb every mountain and once again take up their divinity. Then the gods gave up and said, well, we don't know where to hide it, because it seems that there's no place on earth or in the sea that the human beings will not eventually reach. Brahma thought for a long time, and then he said, here's what we will do. We will hide their divinity deep in the center of their own being, for humans will never think to look for it there. All the gods agreed that this was the perfect hiding place, and the deed was done. And since that time, humans have been going up and down the earth, digging, diving, climbing, and exploring, searching for something already within themselves. So in order for us to live by love, we're called to maintain ourselves consciously in the awareness that we are the sons and the daughters of God, that there is a part of us that is truly divine. And as we connect to it, as we find it, as we feel it, it can't hide from us anymore. We are reminded, and then everything that comes out from there comes from that divine place, from that God seed within. But how do we do this? Well, we have to daily remind ourselves of our connection. Here comes the spiritual practice talk. We have to daily find a way to remind ourselves. We have to give ourselves the gift every day to remind ourselves that we are part of something greater. And whether that's a meditation practice or a prayer practice, whether it's sitting with a practitioner or even standing at the edge of the ocean or hugging a tree or going to that mountaintop. You can't go to a mountaintop without feeling that there's something amazing revealing itself in the world, right? Or maybe it's the ocean, whatever it is for you. That place, those sacred places of our lives that remind us that there's something greater operating here. We have to do that every day. And I will be the cheerleader for that. If someone wants to give me pom-poms, I'll do it. I will be the cheerleader every day for you to do that, because I know when you do that, when you have that practice of connecting to the infinite one every day, there's nothing you can't do. There's nothing you can't heal, and there's nothing you can't create in your life. Absolutely. But we have to do it. A couple of years ago, I went to a conference, and one of the speakers said that we need to rescue Jesus from fundamentalism. I remember sitting there going, oh my gosh. Okay, but the more I think about it, I'm like, what does that mean? How do we do that? How can we go and rescue Jesus from fundamentalism? You know how we do it? We live his teaching. We are the authentic purveyors of Jesus' teaching. When you live his teachings, when you practice them, you are the emanation of God as Jesus in this life. I could get hung for that, or stoned back in the day, I think, for saying that. Please don't stone me. But that's the best way to prove it works, is for us to live the teaching. And it's very simple. It's simple. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's simple. We do unto others as we would have them do unto us. Right? We learned that in kindergarten. We have to cultivate a forgiving heart. That's not easy, because it connects to the places where we've been wounded and where we hurt. Which means that we are called to take responsibility for our pain, to understand why we have the reactions we have. And when you can do that, when you can start to see that something greater is coming, then you can move into a place of being forgiving to someone else. And Jesus said, how much are we supposed to forgive? His disciples asked. And Jesus said, 70 times 7. And no, it wasn't that Jesus liked math. It meant all the time that we are to cultivate a forgiving heart. That there's never a time that Jesus said, okay, well, you're supposed to be forgiving, but you know what, that wrong? You know what? You get to keep it. I'd be mad forever about that one. Could you imagine him saying that? No, that's not the teaching. That we are called to be forgiving, to realize that maybe something else is going on in that person's experience that I don't know about. There's that meme that's going around that says, be kind to people. You never know what burden they're carrying just because they don't tell you. We're called to be sharing and giving and blessing those people we come in contact with. And so how do we know if we're off course on this? Well, when we live and succumb to the ideas and those fantasies of revenge, of showing someone up, right? of the fight that we have in our heads with the person we're mad at, when we are the ones who know what to say absolutely and can put it out there, right? Obviously, I never have done that. But that's how we know when we're off course. That's how we know when we're kind of careening into the ego lane rather than staying in the love lane. So something came up about this week, and I have to share, I was kind of being conscious of what's going on in the world and watching the news. And so a very courageous pastor, walked in to the National Prayer Breakfast this week in a very contentious room with people who are very mad at each other, more mad than I think that anybody we've ever seen. And he stood up and said that we are called to pray for our enemies. And he said, we need to pray for our enemies. And so after that, I don't know if you heard it, but after that, I started getting texts and emails and phone calls and conversations from people who say, how do I do that? It hurts, I don't know. These people, and they're ruining this, and this is happening. And it doesn't matter what side you're on, everybody's mad. And everybody's calling another side an enemy. And I was asking, well, how do you think? Because, I'm a good counselor, so I never tell you what to do. I ask you first, how do you think you should handle this? And someone said, well, I think I'm going to just look at it like they went off track and they don't know what's right and they got kind of confused and they got lost, and so I'll pray for them to be found. And I'm like, okay, that's a start. And somebody else said something like, they just don't see. They just can't see beyond their own needs. So I'm just going to pray that they, I'm going to pray that they can see, that they wake up and that they can see. And I'm like, okay, that's another one. Good ideas. And they said, well, what do you think? I said, well, truly, I'm going to go to what Joel Goldsmith teaches us, and I'll remind you, Joel Goldsmith, who's a New Thought theologian and a mystic, he's an absolutist, so he goes straight to God, right? He goes straight to God. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, no exceptions, nothing. He says, you know what we do? We pray to see them as God. We pray to see them and to realize that God, that they are the begotten of the infinite. And that God is right where they are, and all of the things that we say about ourselves are true about them, too. And so I'm going to pray to know the truth about them, that God is right there where they are, supporting them, guiding them, loving them to their wholeness. As I'm going to do the same for me. And it takes us, right? It takes us in that elevator up, beyond our idea of right and wrong, and into that place that we are all part. We are all made in the image and likeness. That the presence is right where we are. It's hard to do it when we're looking through our human eyes and realizing that we think the stakes are high and things are scary and the choices that they're making. It's really hard to do that. But it's important for us to go back to that powerful place where we connect to the divine spirit within. I want you to think for a minute about, let's start with this. I think, so many of us are raised with this idea that we are weak, that we are broken, that we're wounded, that there's something wrong with us, that we're not good enough for X, Y, Z, whatever, that we get that message, and sometimes it implants in us, and it takes root deep within us. And then our lives come out from that. And so the idea that we are whole, perfect, complete, that we are emanations of the divine, and we have everything capable within us is like a foreign idea. But what I want you to think about in your life is someone who saw the truth of you. Think back, and whether it was a parent or not, or a coach or a teacher or someone, a mentor, someone who just, came in and out of your life maybe, but someone who could see you for who you are. We've all got them. And I want you to think about how you felt about yourself when they looked at you. I want you to think about what you learned about yourself that you were capable of because someone else just knew that you were. That's what we're doing for our enemies or for those who we have a harder time loving when we look at them and see them as the divine presence of God. You are calling it forward. You are seeing through all the veneer of the lies that people have been told and believe about themselves for years and calling forth that truth. That's why we pray for our enemies. Not only to know that they are the divine, but that we are the divine and we can see it. It's spirit recognizing itself. And again, I know that it's not easy. I know that it's not the easiest thing to do. But when we can see through the situation into the center of their being, their connection with God, we move from what Joel Goldsmith calls the law of humanhood into grace. And grace is what we want. The experience of grace, which is that peace and that connection and allowing it into our lives. That's love in action, when we can do that. So I have a little practice, and that's how we love spiritually, when we acknowledge somebody else as the divine presence of perfection. And so there is a little bit of a practice that I'm going to walk us through today to do this. And I'll admit that this is one of the most powerful practices that I've done when I'm dealing with situations and people that I have a hard time with. And yes, I am human, and yes, I do get into little things sometimes. But so this is the, and I've done it before with the center, but this is the loving kindness meditation. So I'm going to just guide you through it. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable, take a breath. And I want you to imagine someone in front of you that you love, your beloved. Maybe it's your partner, your child, your parent, your friend. And I want you to say silently to yourself, to them, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. And may you be happy. And then you can, in your own mind's eye, give them whatever kind of blessing you want, a little namaste, a little bow, touching your heart, whatever it is. You can bless them. And then I want you to picture the cashier at the last store you went to. Could be Starbucks this morning, or wherever you went. And I want you to imagine them in front of you. This is someone that you don't really know, neutral to, right? And I want you to do the same thing. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. And may you be happy. Again, giving them a little blessing and blessing them back off into their experience. And you know what's coming. This is the one. You got to pick someone who you're having a challenge with, someone you may be in a fight with, someone you may not be happy with. Calling them in front of you. And once again, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. And may you be happy. And you can let that go. And when you're ready, you can come on back. So that's a very simple example, and I'll post it. But the idea of it is this: that's an affirmation. And so when you get into those times where you're doing the fight with the person in your head before you talk to them, do the loving kindness meditation as an affirmation over and over and over and over again. It works really well with exes. It works really well with challenging people in our lives, you know. But to live by love, we need to commit to rise above our humanness. We need to take responsibility for our reactions and choose to create a space for love, no matter what. And I will admit that this is an advanced spiritual practice. This is not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. And it is absolutely advanced spiritual work. But doesn't it feel good to know that there are people who are willing to do this work in the world right now? Isn't it good to know that there is a group of people intent on creating a space of love? You know, the Bible says where two or more are gathered in the midst, there am I. Just think about what 120 people can do together, not only in this valley, but in the world. And that's my goal. That's my goal for us, and so it is.